Good morning, men.
Good morning.
Gosh, so good to see you all. You haven't changed a bit. I was working on this message. I thought, well, I might as well use a template from Ironworks that I last used, and that was November 2013 when I last spoke at Ironworks. So it's coming up on 5 years.
You haven't changed a bit.
Thank you. I'm kind of curious how many of you are curious about what I'm going to say. Roger kept asking me, well, what are you planning to talk about? I said, well, I haven't figured it out yet because I'm still kind of letting it incubate and I'm curious about it myself. But this idea of curiosity has gotten me, it's just my latest word that I'm using to cultivate a discipline in my life. I want to share that with you. But I want to start by telling you that at my age, I'm meeting more and more with my children's contemporaries. Any of you guys do that? You're meeting with your kids' friends and giving them advice on life. And since I run several businesses and I'm considerably well networked in the Twin Cities, I have a lot of people that I meet with that just are asking, what's it like to get into business? And I have to tell you, from early 20s, and I had this conversation with somebody that was considerably older, but they all come to me, and generally speaking, I'm trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Have you heard that before? This is a big question. What should I be when I grow up? And I listen to them and ask them some questions. But what I find when they ask me that question isn't that they're just asking out of curiosity. They're asking almost out of shame, like they should have figured that out by now. So I try to set them at ease, and I say, well, I'm 58 years old. I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. And in fact, one of the podcasts that we started a few years ago that I did with Armin, our very first episode is the question you should never stop asking yourself. And I believe it's this: what should I be when I grow up? Or better, what does God want me to do next? Because if we settle that question in our lives, I think we stop asking the question of God, what are you unfolding in our lives? And I think that ought to be not an answerable thing. It ought to be something that drives us each time to come before the Lord and say, what are you doing here in my life, with the circumstances that I'm in, with the people that I get to interact with? Where are you at work? When Nicodemus and Jesus were talking, and Nicodemus was just wondering how a man can be born again, one of the things that Jesus said to him is, the wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. Now, we all relate to that. I have a story of I know a number of you guys do the Ironworks bike rides, so how many have done that or ride bikes? Okay. So on one of the trainings a number of years ago, a few of us guys went, is it 160th down to Hastings? Yeah. So we went down to Hastings, and we had this horrible headwind the entire way down. It was like we were pooped just getting to Hastings, and we had, but all the way down we thought, all right, we're going to celebrate at the Applebee's down there. We'll have lunch, and then we're going to enjoy a really fast, wicked ride back home. By the time we got done with lunch, the wind had gone the other direction. You don't know where it comes from. In this case, we knew where it was coming from, but we didn't anticipate where it was going. We were all psyched up to, coming home at about 100 miles an hour, and instead, we had our work cut out for us. But here's what Jesus says. Not only does it blow where it pleases, and this is what the Spirit is like, he says, so it is with everyone born of the Spirit. You get that? It's not just the Spirit that goes wherever it wills, and you don't know where it's coming or where it's going, but it's that way with everyone born of the Spirit. In other words, we have to maintain our curiosity about what God is doing, because we might be going this way and leaning into something here, and then the next time we're going to go over here and lean into something else, because that's what God is calling us to do. I want to be kingdom curious. And my objective of this presentation this morning with you, or our discussion really, is, this would be my hope, is that I increase your appetite to be kingdom curious too. So let's look at this. And here's an interesting verse. Matthew chapter 13, 44. By the way, I'm not going to share any verse that you don't already probably know by heart. But there's something, I think, in each of these that we can really pull out in mind for ourselves. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Now, I got a couple takeaways from this passage, and they're not earth-shattering in terms of intellectual understanding, but I think they ought to be really motivating emotionally for us. The first is that Jesus is saying the kingdom is like a treasure that's hidden. And it's worth everything that we possess to get it. So here is something that's worth everything in our lives to go get. And I read a passage like that, and I ask myself, if that were true, and I believe the scripture is true, how does that change what I do with my life? If the kingdom is a treasure that requires everything be given in order for us to possess it, what does that look like? So it made me curious in a different way. Why is it hidden? Why is the kingdom hidden from us? In Proverbs 25:2, we get a look at this a little bit, and it says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and to search out a matter is the glory of kings. So God is in the business of concealing some things. It's to his glory to do so. But why? So I'm curious. Why is that? Why didn't he just write John 3:16 in the sky? You know, that would be pretty clear. I mean, it's unmistakable. Everybody would know. That's not a normal thing to happen, and somehow the clouds arrange and God so loved the world became evident for everybody to see, as opposed to at a football stadium on Sundays. You know, his disciples asked a similar question. Jesus had just been telling them about the parable of the sower and the seed, and they asked him, why do you speak to the people in parables? I mean, that's a way of hiding truth, right? A parable is a concealment of truth. And he says, why do you speak to them in parables? He replied, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. That's why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear and understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Now get this. Here's what he says. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. The reason things are hidden from us is we can't see them is because we've allowed our eyes, our hearts, to become calloused. That Greek word is pakos, which means to fatten or make dull. And they had the equipment to see. They had the eyes, but they couldn't see. They had the ears, but couldn't hear. And of course, on a number of occasions, Jesus says, he who has ears, let him hear. You could say maybe they were thick-headed, fat, lazy. Definitely not sharp. Definitely not iron sharpens iron, right? That's not, we couldn't say that here. Because we're here to sharpen our metal. We're here to make sure that this kind of fatness, this kind of thickness doesn't keep us from seeing what's happening in the kingdom of God in our own lives. But unless we intentionally practice what I've been calling kingdom curiosity, for lack of a better word, seeking the hidden treasure in a field, we will ourselves become dull. You know, and it's built into our psyches. Psychologists call it the status quo bias. It's our preference for keeping things the way they are. We don't like change. You know, I think all of us would admit to that. When we have our routine and something gets disrupted from our routine, we don't like that. I had to go to a board meeting in Albert Lee yesterday. It meant I had to not have my routine in the morning. I didn't like that. I had to come here. I didn't have to come here. I get to come here. But I will tell you, I mean, let's be honest. This is disruptive to my routine. And it's not because I'm sleeping, although I would be sleeping a little bit longer. It's because I have a morning routine that I go through. And it was a number of years ago that I decided what I want to do in terms of how I fill my appetite with the reading and the writing that I want to do is that I need to make sure that other people's agendas do not become mine. And so I had carved out my mornings as this is the time for my work, my stuff, and the afternoons is when I meet with people and I engage in meetings. Now, I can afford to do that being that I'm a business owner and I can set my own schedule, more or less. But we don't like anything out of our routine. We don't like to get uncomfortable, and it's largely the reason we complain about things. We don't like to be bothered or inconvenienced. And just when I thought I had all my control issues under control, something comes along. Well, I think the point is of this passage, and the part that grips me about it is that we can't find the kingdom from the comfort of our couch. It is not going to come to us. We have to go get it. We have to do the work to see what God is doing in our lives and through our lives and in the lives of other people. Matthew 11, Jesus puts it in pretty strong words. He says, "The kingdom of heaven has been forcefully advancing," and catch this, "and forceful men lay hold of it." In other words, the kingdom of heaven is advancing in such a way that it's unstoppable. You cannot do something. I shudder when I read stories, don't you? When I read news articles about how the church is in decline, how everything is going to fall apart in a handbasket. Now, granted that we've got challenges as believers in the world, but God's kingdom is not going to be destroyed by anything we do. It's advancing whether we're in it or not. And it is unstoppable. And so the only question is, are we going to have that same level of energy to pursue what's going on in it as well? And that's an intentional pursuit, and it calls it to find us. But the problem is it's not a loud call. It's not like the call of our daily lives that have all these things that we have to get done. It's not the urgency of business. It's the quiet kind of call. Remember Mary sitting at Jesus' feet. What was she doing there? Listening. I don't see anything in that passage with Martha doing all the stuff that she was for preparation. I don't see anything in that passage where Jesus said, "Hey, you guys, come and listen to what I want to talk about because I've got some really important insights I want to share with you." Maybe if he'd done that, Martha would not have been serving in the kitchen. I mean, she was doing what she felt was the right thing to do when you have a guest over, right? I mean, we pick on Martha a lot. But the fact of the matter is Mary was in tune to the importance of Jesus for a different matter than just a guest in the house. That here himself was the king. And if we're going to be in the presence of the king, we don't need to be invited to sit and listen to what he says. We need to go get it. Our Bibles will sit there all day patiently waiting for us to turn the page, won't they? It's not going to jump up and say, "Hey, I've got a word for you today, and it's in this verse." The only way we're going to find that is if we dig ourselves and dig in ourselves and find out. So we need to develop a curiosity strategy, and that's what I want to try to help with today. And we need to know what it looks like. Now, what I'm about to tell you that it looks like, you might agree, you might disagree, and you might have your own stuff. That's great, because I don't have a lock on what kingdom curiosity looks like. But when I think about what somebody might look like, I need a reference model. I need to say, what is it that I would aspire to what this kingdom curiosity pursuit might look like? And so this is my reference model, in as imperfect as it is, so take it for what you like and add to it yourself as you see fit. But the first is, I think a kingdom-curious person has an extraordinary awareness of the presence of God in their life. They are in tune to the fact that there isn't anything that God isn't there with them. And every day when I journal, not every day that I journal, but when I do, I largely end my journal with the words from David in Psalm 18, verse 1. "I love you, O Lord, my strength." Now, for me, that has become a verse that is so meaningful to me because I need to rely daily, I imagine you do too, on God's strength to get through what you need to get through. And the connection with God's heart, I love you, O Lord, my strength. It just says it all right there. And you read the rest of Psalm 18 and it reinforces that one line. I love you, O Lord, my strength. It's that idea that God is personal, he's near, he's not distant, he's involved, and he moves people and situations, that I can count on that. And I know that he's ever present. Second, signs of a kingdom-curious person to me are they're not victims. They don't run around complaining about what's happened to them. They know that God is in control. And even when they are not, they know that God somehow is going to use whatever is happening to further his kingdom, and it causes them to lean in and be more curious. I don't like what just happened here. It doesn't mean we're happy about stuff, but it means to say we can't be victims. And we're not going to point and blame other people for stuff. And we need to display that we have volitional choice, and we're not going to quickly fault others or outcomes that aren't pleasant for us. Third is kind of related. They're not easily offended. Do you notice how many people are so easily offended today? And it's like if we're going to be kingdom-curious people, we need to be able to interact with people who might be offensive without taking an offense. They might take and be very much misaligned with what we see in the world, what we view, what we value, what we see in the word of truth. But for us to become offended and defensive does nothing to gain an understanding of what God might want to do to purpose and to yield a result in their life. Fourth, they take an active interest in other people. And this just comes down to just simple math. I remember when Anna, my wife Anna, had gone to New York one time, and she's not an extreme introvert, but to me, she's an extreme introvert. On the scale, she's not, but she's an introvert. You know what I'm talking about. And she went to New York City, and she was overwhelmed by the number of people there. You know, you get into the, downtown Manhattan, you walk around, and especially for an introvert, it can get quite, exhausting. And her attitude about it changed when she just realized, where God's people is, where people are, God's Spirit is there too. And that's where God wants to do his work. And I started thinking about that myself. Why not just look at people as the vessels to which God is either wanting to create a relationship or has one already? And how can I fan that into flame? That means that I need to be willing to listen to people and hear their stories and not go first all the time. It's amazing how often you just ask somebody a question, and I'll give you some examples of that in a little bit, how you can ask a question and unlock some things. People love to talk about themselves, generally speaking, because very few people do. We're all so interested in what we're doing, which is all good in a way. I mean, you want to be motivated to do what you're doing, but there's something really powerful at work when we listen and lean into other people's stories and take active interest in them. Fifth, they're humble. I mean, that's easy to say. Let's unpack that a little bit. Let's talk about humility as maybe not assuming that my way of understanding is the best way to understand something. Maybe it takes a certain sense of humility to realize that people think differently than I do. Or maybe people think differently about things than I do. And maybe a kingdom-curious person would really try to understand, how do they think about that? And instead of thinking about their thinking being wrong, what if I thought about perhaps my thinking might be wrong? How is it that maybe God might have brought them into my life just to challenge some callousness of my own that may be keeping me from seeing the way he wants to build something into me? And maybe humility also means that I'm not sitting here trying to advance my agenda over theirs. Maybe it allows them to go first. Maybe I seek to improve them and their life and leave every relationship as I can, the best that I can, leaving everyone that I encounter perhaps better than when I met them. Maybe if that were my goal, that would be a nice sign of humility. And you could come up with all kinds. We often think about humility in different ways, don't we? We think about it as this, kind of this quiet, I'll let anybody do anything to me kind of thing. But what if we thought about it in a more vibrant way? 6, they're not presumptive about people. This is a problem I get into in my own life a lot. I think I am a pretty good read of people. How many of you believe that for yourself? Just me? Come on, join with me. All right. I know there are many more hands that would have been raised, except you felt like maybe others would be judging you for doing so. Here's the nut for me. I have found time and time again that first impressions are not reliable. Would you agree? The more you get to know somebody and maybe the pain that might have driven them to be such a jerk the first time you met them, maybe you get a little bit of understanding about why they behave that way. And you start, when you spend time and genuinely care about people, something gets transformed in your relationship with them. And I found that that's especially true, get this, when I take time to pray for them. I think C.S. Lewis had it right when he said, when we invest prayer in someone else, we're investing a part of ourselves there, and it's kind of hard to hate somebody that you've invested yourself into. Wow, what a call for that, huh? 7, they're redemptively minded. They're asking how God might be using a person or a situation to display his grace. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul says, so from now on we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Think about that. Our default mindset is to say, worldly point of view, I'm thinking about you in terms of what you can do to keep me comfortable. How can you make my life better today? Because that's really the value that you have for me is how you can make my life better. And Paul says, we're not looking at people from a worldly point of view. We're looking at them from how God sees them, what his mission is on life to do what he wants to do in their lives. In fact, I would say it's the pursuit of understanding grace. When we really pursue what it looks like to understand grace, it's grace, and that pursuit of grace, that fuels the curious. That's what fuels us as kingdom-curious men and women, if there were any here. And unless I understand the power of grace in my own life, I won't look for it in others. It just comes down to that. If I don't appreciate what God has done for me, I won't begin to look for it, how he's been doing it for others. And the irony is, the more I look for it in others, the more I see ways in which he might be building it in my own life. So I hope that I would be able to convince you to be kingdom curious. I'm not good at parables like Jesus was, so I have no way of telling whether you have ears to hear or eyes to see. And I know personally this is a big area for me to grow in. So let me share with you some of the habits that I've been working on and hope that maybe some of these will spur some thinking in your own on how you might be kingdom curious. 3 habits. First, upward habits. Upward habits, how we're relating to God in 2 ways. One, you heard it here, first time I'm sure, read your Bible. I mean, I read a book either every week or every other week, but I read my Bible every day. I mean, when I say a book, I finish a book every week or every other week. That's my personal reading plan. But I would think all that's a waste if I don't start it with reading the Bible. And I will say that also, and this is true confession here, for 25 years, I think many of you know I taught here quite a bit. Okay, so let's get to real confessions, because I think when I taught here every week or other week with you and Roger, I was not reading my Bible every day. Part of what fueled me was preparing the message. That got me into the Word, but it wasn't a consistent reading of the Bible every day. That actually happened 4 years ago. I had done it long ago, and it's like then I would get to it sporadically. Then I would get to it when I needed to accomplish a preparation for a message. And now I do it consistently every day. And the only thing that made a difference for me, frankly, the only thing that made a difference was I went to a website and I found where I could download a yearly calendar of what I need to read, and I put it in my calendar. It's the first thing I do every morning. And it takes me, literally, I get through the Bible in 10 to 12 minutes. Guys, tell me you can't get through anything in 10 to 12 minutes if you just do it every day. It's not that daunting. And it has been totally transformational. Prayer. Again, I feel like I'm spilling all my stuff up here. I'm not very good at prayer either. It's not a strong suit of mine. So I'm intentionally working on a strategy that's basically simply ask and do. I ask someone if they need prayer or if I could pray for them if they tell me of a situation that I discern maybe the Spirit wants me to lean into. And then I do it then. right then, with them. And I can't tell you the number of men that I've had, like on a phone call or whatever, that have said, wow, thank you. That's literally the first time anybody's done that for me. I'm like, seriously? We are bereft then, guys, of praying for one another, if that's the case. Is that your experience? I took it a little bit further, and I got to do this more often, but I call it the Walmart challenge. I don't know what got into me. This is one of those spirit goes wherever, and and I went to Walmart. And I walked in, and it was like I heard God say, pray for the people here. And I said, okay, who? No, everyone. Okay, bless Walmart people. No, everyone you see. Wow, try this out sometime. This was really a wake-up call for me. You start to see stuff when everyone you encounter on your way, I just needed to go get one thing. It was at the other end of the store, but I'm looking at people and I'm like, okay, I see this mom and her kids, and I'm praying for the mom and the kids. I'm like, I start to notice stuff that I hadn't noticed before. And I started to imagine what some of these kids might be like when they grow up, and I started to pray for their future and the impact that they might have. And who knows how God is going to use any of that. And maybe he doesn't use it for them. It was just to soften my heart. Either way, I don't know what the purpose was, but I was certainly taken by it. I propose that you give the Walmart or Home Depot or whatever challenge you want. Go somewhere and just pray for everyone that you run into. It's a change. Outward habits. Okay, so here's where it kind of gets hard. This is engaging with others. I mean, obviously we can't be kingdom curious if we don't engage with others. And we need to purposefully be meeting new people. But as we do so, we need to be aware of our bias for blindness. And this is not just racial or geographic, but it's also vocational. I mean, how often do we pay attention to a server that serves us our meal and engage with them in a way that's meaningful and thoughtful and not just dismissive because they're serving us? Or, we drop off our laundry and we have the clerk or something that's taking our laundry. Do we engage with them in a meaningful and vibrant and upbeat way? And then when we have an opportunity for engaging questions, do we ask them? So I want to share what I call the Thomas Merton questions. These are really transformative for me. And Thomas Merton wrote this. He says, if you want to identify me, ask me not where I live or what I like to eat or how I comb my hair, but ask me what I think I'm living for in detail, and ask me what I think is keeping me from living fully the thing that I want to live for. So there's two Thomas Merton questions. What are you here for? Which is, what's the name of that book? What on earth am I here for? All right, perfect setup for that. What are you here for, and what's keeping you from it? Now, how many times have you been in a study group or a one-on-one conversation with a guy that's basically straight up asked you that question? Why do you think you're here? Well, because I'm hungry. No, I mean, why are you alive today? What are you here to do? And what's keeping you from it? Those are the Thomas Merton questions, and great questions to dig deeper than just a passive surface conversation. And then I learned another one here at Ironworks, by the way. I learned this one. If you want to get at the heart of a guy pretty quickly, you can ask one very simple question. Tell me about your dad. I met Gordon McDonald at the airport to bring him here to speak one time, and I had all these questions I was going to ask him. And that guy's masterful at questions. I think the first question he asked me was, tell me about your dad. And that was it. Game over, man. I was like talking the rest of the day. And I'm like, wait a minute. I got it home, and I had all these questions I was intentionally going to ask him. Dang it. He's so much better at that than I am. Last one, inward habit. I already mentioned it before. The most transformative inward habit for self-reflection that I have embarked on in the last 5 years is to journal. And I do it every day. I write 3 pages. Sounds daunting. It is to start with, but it's such a discipline for me right now. It takes me 25 minutes to do. Again, it's not a huge consumption of time. It takes me 25 minutes to write 3 largely unlegible pages. I'd be happy to have you look at my journal because you probably wouldn't be able to decipher it anyway. But the point is what I find by going through it and just writing what's ever on my mind. And if something isn't on my mind, I write the words, I don't know what I'm going to write about. I don't know what I'm going to write about. I don't know what I'm going to write about. And I write it until I'm bored myself to writing something about something else. And I'm okay with that. I have uncovered the shame in my life from the disconnect that I've had with my father through this. I have uncovered so much insight into the Word by just taking a verse and just incubating on it. Or business insight, things that I want to share with my clients or help them with their lives. It is the most transformative habit. I'd be happy to chat with you further about that. So steal mine or create your own habits, but I want to just help you get started real quick. And on your worksheet, I have this Kingdom Curiosity Action Plan. You're probably wondering what that's all about. I have 5 questions and simply put, these questions, like all of what I've just told you, is, change them. Do whatever you want with it. But I found that any area in my life, if I ask a question about that area in my life and I score myself on a score of 1 to 10. So for instance, how regularly do I read the Bible? Take a moment, just score yourself, 1 to 10. If you read it every day, you give a higher score. If you're not reading at all, you give yourself a lower score. How good am I at remembering others' names? Now, I have to give myself a terrible score on this. When I was at the Minnesota prayer breakfast, I had to ask the same guy 3 times what his name was. I do this to my shame. 3 times, and I left, and I thought, what was his name again?
Getting old, Larry.
No, I'm getting thick, fat, lazy, and old. How comfortable am I at asking the Merton-like questions of others? Score that on a scale of 1 to 10. How often do I offer and remember to pray for others? Man, I can't tell you how many times I've committed people, I'll be praying for you, and then that's just like a have a nice day. What if I take that seriously? How good am I at saying I'm going to follow through on the commitment that I make for others to pray for them? How often do I reflect meaningfully on what God is doing in my life? Now, what you do then is you score each of those. And listen, take a minute and do this. Score each. So you got one might be a 4, another might be a 6, another might be a 7. And then ask yourself this question. What does it take for me to move it from up 1 point? To go from a 4 to a 5, a 6 to a 7, a 7 to an 8. Just 1 point. You're not trying to get perfection. You're trying to get improvement. We're trying to take off the callousness. What does it take for me to move that dimension in my life by 1 point? You can make a question up for anything that you want to pursue in your life. You can say, how well am I doing it? What does it take? Because implicitly, when you write down, I'm a 7, you already know why you didn't write down you were an 8. So say, what do I need to do to make it an 8? You already know. So just put it down. But here's the thing. You have a choice. We all have choices about how we want to become more curious. And I'm curious about how that's going to turn out in my own life. Will you join me in that? Will you join me in being curious, being kingdom curious? It's not a rhetorical question. I'd like to just get it. Yes? All right. Let me pray. I thought, man, I just spent all this time up here. All right. Going to pray. Father, Lord, I thank you that I can be among these men again and just have some fun and look at your word and just be overwhelmed, really overwhelmed and astonished by the grace that's all around us. And the fact that you've given us grace even to be stupid and fat and lazy and in seeing all the things that you have unfolding. It's like you've got this great thing happening amidst us and we're just kind of walking around bumping into stuff. And yet you have grace for us even in our bumbling about. And so, Father, I just pray that you would take these words in our spirit this morning and just transform them into a deep motivation for each of us to get to know you better. Oh, Lord, we love you. You are our strength. Amen. Guys, if you want, next slide is just how you can get a hold of me for any reason. I'll be back in another 5 years. LarryGates.com. I have a new podcast now called the Bold Idea Podcast. Had the author of The Shack on there. We've had some really terrific guests. I invite you to check that out sometime. And then there are 3 discussion questions that you can do at your table. How long do we have, Roger? 15 minutes. Go at it, guys.